alien instructor bragged about killing humans. The Deathworld Earth girl crushed him before he could react. The number on the display was 61. Not the room's temperature, not a cadet's injury rating or a pre-fight safety threshold. The biometric monitor at the center of the demonstration floor was reading the heart rate of a human female who had just been invited to step down into that floor by the most decorated combat instructor in the Velkar Combat Directorate's history, a man whose throat frills were currently spread to their full span, wide and pale, and trembling slightly at the edges, the way they always did when he was certain of something. 61 beats per minute. Sub-Proctor Sen read the number twice. He had been processing intake paperwork for 4 cycles. He had activated the biometric array for 11 formal sessions. He had watched cadets from 28 species step onto that floor and had logged their vitals as they did it. The lowest heart rate he had ever recorded at the moment of floor entry was 83. The number did not change, 61. The display updated every 4 seconds. Sen counted 3 updates. The number held. He wrote it in his working log and underlined it once, which was not standard procedure. The biometric station smelled of recycled coolant and something faintly mineral, the iron-filtered air the directorate pumped through the observation gallery to keep instrument readings clean. Sen had stopped noticing it in his first cycle. He noticed it now, for reasons he could not immediately explain. 3 hours earlier, in the intake processing bay on sublevel 2, he had opened Revakane's enrollment file and found it half empty. This was not unusual for colony origin cadets. The Directorate's intake database had been built on core world biologies, species with established records, measurable threat ratings, files that arrived pre-formatted and cross-referenced with the Galactic Council's standard assessment grid. Colony worlds sometimes submitted files that looked like this one: origin world listed, gravity index absent, fauna catalog blank, threat environment classification reading simply non-standard. Sen had searched the database for Callister 9. The search returned no entry. He had filed her under colony, non-standard, the category that effectively meant not worth a separate line in the grid, and moved to the next form. His luminescent threads, the faint circulatory network visible beneath Yerevan's skin that brightened involuntarily when his nervous system spiked, had been completely steady. Everything was procedurally correct. He had noted the gap in the database and done nothing about it, because the gap was not his department, and the form required only that he assign a classification, which he had done. He had not thought about it again until approximately 12 minutes ago, when Cadet Kane had walked into the lecture hall and sat in the back row. She had sat down the way someone sits when they have arrived slightly early and are waiting for something unrelated to begin. Her posture was not tense. Her posture was not relaxed in the deliberate way cadets sometimes performed relaxation to signal that they were not afraid. It was simply the posture of a person who had found a chair and used it. She had set a small kit bag on the floor beside her boot and left her hands loose in her lap. Sen had noticed the small chip clipped to the inside of her collar. It was half hidden by the collar's fold, visible only at an angle, only when she tilted her head, which she had done once to look at the biometric display screen on the wall to her left. A Velkar Challenge medallion. Every cadet received one at enrollment. The medallion represented the right, written into the Directorate's founding charter, to formally dispute an instructor's account under the challenge protocol. Most cadets kept theirs in a kit bag somewhere. Sen had seen them used as weights, as drawer fillers, as items absent-mindedly left on dormitory windowsills. He had never, in 4 cycles of intake work, seen one worn. He had written medallion, collar, visible in his working log, and filed it under no category at all, because he could not identify a category that applied. Stay close, this part matters. The lecture had opened with the kill tally. This was Instructor Drethkal's standard opening, and it was Sen could say this without exaggeration, the most effective room silencing technique he had ever witnessed in an institutional setting. Drethkal was Sorvani, broad-shouldered and scaled along the forearms and jaw, with a tail that rested flat and still when he was at ease and angled upward when he was performing. He took the podium and his throat frills spread immediately, the Sorvani reflex, to a room full of attention, and he began to count backward from his most recent engagement. The hall held 300 cadets. It went very quiet, very fast. Sen had heard the tally 11 times over his 4 cycles. He was slightly ashamed to admit, begun mouthing along with the larger numbers. Drethkal's voice had a particular quality during the tally, not loud, but weighted, each number given exactly the pause it needed to settle in the room before the next one arrived. By the 4th entry, his frills were at full extension. By the 8th, the hall had the specific texture of absolute attention, which is not the same as silence. It is the sound of 300 people holding their breathing at the same rate. He reached entry 4. From the back row, a clear, unhurried voice said, "I counted 3 discrepancies in the first 4 entries. I stopped counting after that. It seemed unkind to continue." The silence that followed was a different kind entirely. Sen's luminescent threads flickered once. He looked at his hands, then at the biometric array, then at the back row. Cadet Kane had not moved. She was still sitting with her hands loose in her lap, and her expression, the first time Sen had a clear look at it, was the expression of someone waiting for a form to finish processing. Drethkal's throat frills did not retract. They stayed at full extension, which, in Sorvani physiology, was the display position that preceded certainty. Sen had seen it before every engagement he had ever watched Drethkal open. The frills were not threat display. They were the signal for, "I know exactly what this is." He pulled the file on Rivakane from the podium's intake panel. Sen watched him read it. 3 lines. He watched Drethkal's eyes move across those 3 lines. Colony-grade origin, non-standard classification, no prior directorate enrollment. And he watched the assessment form in the same time it had taken Sen that morning, approximately 4 seconds. "I have the file," Drethkal said. His voice carried easily to the back row. "Colony grade, Callister 9. The board doesn't catalog worlds like that because nothing worth cataloging has ever come off them." He set the panel down on the podium. "The challenge protocol exists," he said, "so that cadets who believe an instructor's record is in error may dispute it formally on the floor under observation." He paused. "It has been invoked 14 times in this directorate's history. 14 successful challenges, 14. He let the number sit. Every one of those challenges was resolved in the instructor's favor. Cadet Kane nodded once, slowly, the nod of someone confirming a figure they had already looked up. 14 from 312 species, she said. That's the database. What's the count from worlds the database doesn't classify? Nobody answered. The question did not have an answer because the database had never been asked it, and the question assumed a category that did not exist in the directorate's records. Sen wrote it in his working log. He could not identify a category for it either. Drethkal's frills held at full extension. "You are invoking the challenge protocol," he said. It was not a question. "Yes," she said. She stood. She picked up her kit bag with her left hand and set it on the empty seat beside her with the unhurried efficiency of someone making space in a queue. Then she walked to the end of the back row and began descending the steps toward the demonstration floor. The biometric array activated on Sen's panel as he reached for it, standard procedure, automated on challenge invocation, but his hand had moved before the system triggered. He logged the time. He logged the invocation. He stated, for the record, that this was the first challenge protocol invocation in cycle 44. He did not state that it was the first in 4 cycles. He did not state that it was the first in 40. Those facts were not required for the log. He thought about them anyway. The display loaded as she stepped onto the floor. Her heart rate appeared on every screen in the hall. 61. 3 rows in front of Sen, 2 cadets from a species whose name he had not yet memorized looked at the number on the screen, then looked at each other, then looked back at the screen. One of them said something very quietly to the other. Sen could not hear it. The second cadet did not respond. Drethkal descended from the podium and walked to the floor's edge. His tail was angled upward. His frills were fully spread. His eyes moved over Rivakane with the particular quality of attention that Sen had learned in 4 cycles to identify as the look of a species computing a threat assessment. Whatever he computed, Sen could see the moment it finished. The computation resolved into certainty. It always did with Drethkal. It had resolved into certainty 312 times. The frills at full extension were its external sign. His blind spot, the belief that had never once failed him across every species the Directorate had ever enrolled, the thing he had filed as something close to biological law, was this: at the moment of genuine escalation, something in a small body that had never faced a real threat would surface and freeze. Not cowardice, not weakness exactly, something older. The survival instinct that lived below decision-making, that bypassed choice, that had kept smaller creatures alive across 100 worlds by making them stop when something larger moved toward them. Every species he had ever tested had flinched. He had never needed to wonder why. The data was complete. He stepped onto the floor. Drethkal assumed his combat stance. Sen had seen this stance graded in the Directorate's own instructor certification record. The word used was exemplary. Weight across both feet, shifted slightly back, claws angled low and forward for a disabling arc rather than a killing one. Tail flat and balanced for redirection. It was the correct stance for a formal demonstration, designed to end the engagement cleanly, without lasting injury, in a way the whole hall could see and learn from. He had opened 847 training engagements from this stance. Sen knew the number because he had processed the certification file. He had not thought about it until now. Rivakane stood on the floor across from him and did nothing in particular. Her feet were about shoulder-width apart. Her hands were loose at her sides. She was looking at Drethkal the way Sen sometimes looked at a form he was about to complete, not at the whole thing, just at the first line. Drethkal moved. The claw arc was fast. Sen had watched it in the certification footage and understood abstractly that it was fast, but the certification footage was slowed for review, and on the floor at real speed it was different. It was calibrated for the upper shoulder, disabling, fight-ending, the kind of contact that would drop a cadet's arm to their side and stop the engagement before it started. Correct choice. Humane. The sort of thing that ended in 11 seconds and filed cleanly. Riva was not there. She had not dodged it. Sen's eye could not find the moment she moved. She was simply no longer in the arc's path. She was inside it, inside the radius where the strike could not adjust, and her elbow found the nerve cluster at Drethkal's forward shoulder with a sound like a knuckle on wood. His right arm dropped 3 inches and stayed. The biometric display updated. Drethkal's heart rate, 94, climbing. Riva stepped back. She did not follow through. She returned to the same loose-handed stance and waited, and her heart rate on the screen read 61, and the only sound in the hall was the monitor's soft 4-second ping. Sen's luminescent threads brightened. He felt them do it, the faint internal warmth under the skin that he had never been able to suppress, and he pressed his forearm against the monitor station's edge to hide them, which did not work, and which he knew did not work, and which he did it anyway. He looked at the human response profile on his tablet. He had pulled it when Drethkal invoked the protocol out of professional habit. The Directorate maintained species response files for all enrolled groups, and he used them during formal sessions to anticipate next move patterns. The human profile was 4 pages. It had been compiled from 17 decades of Directorate observation, cross-referenced with Galactic Council data, and updated 3 cycles ago. He found the section on response to successful defensive contact. It listed 4 probable next actions: press the advantage, reset to guard, display the injury, attempt escape. He looked up from the tablet. Riva was waiting. She had not pressed. She had not reset to any recognizable guard position. She was not displaying anything. She had not moved at all beyond the step back, and the step back had been so unhurried it had not registered as a tactical choice until just now, when Sen looked at the space between her and Drethkal and understood that she had placed exactly the distance between them that she wanted. He looked back at the profile. He read all 4 options again. Then he set the tablet face down on the monitor station. Drethkal shook the feeling back into his right arm. This took approximately 8 seconds. Sen logged it. The nerve cluster she had found was a known Sorvani vulnerability. It appeared in the Directorate's species physiology files, available to all enrolled cadets. But finding it cleanly, at that angle, on an opening strike that had not made full contact, required either a specific study of Sorvani anatomy or a quality of spatial calculation that the human response profile did not list under colony origin intake assessments. His throat frills had not retracted. They were still at full extension. Sen did not know what to make of this. In Sorvani physiology, frill retraction was the response to recalibration the moment a threat was upgraded. Full extension was certainty. The frills had not moved because Sen understood Drethkal had not yet updated the assessment. What had happened was, in his framework, an anomaly, a single data point, not a revision. He came forward again. Different angle, lower trajectory, leading with his left side to take the right arm's numbness out of the equation. Still controlled, still within the parameters of a demonstration engagement. She stepped inside it. Not through it this time. She read the angle change, adjusted before the strike committed, and went left instead of straight. Her shoulder found his extended elbow and redirected it, used the momentum of the strike against its own direction, and her right hand tapped his jaw plate twice with her first 2 fingers. Light contact, the kind that in a real engagement would have been something else entirely, but on the demonstration floor was simply here and here. 2 openings, she said, to the air in front of her, to no one visible. She stepped back. Drethkal's frills moved. Not retraction, a shift, a small compression at the base, the beginning of something. Sen had been watching Sorvani physiology in this hall for 4 cycles. He had never seen that specific intermediate position before. He wrote frill shift, non-standard position, cycle 44, session 11 in his working log, and did not know what category to file it under. In the 3rd row, a cadet from a scaled species whose name Sen had not learned shifted back in her chair. She did it without looking at the chair. Her eyes stayed on the floor. The engagement continued. This was the part Sen found most difficult to describe later when he was writing the first draft of the incident report. He tried several words. Pattern was technically accurate but implied she was doing something repetitive, which was not quite right. Method was closer but suggested a fixed approach, and what she was doing was not fixed. It was responsive, adjusted to each of Drethkal's choices as he made them. He settled eventually on rhythm, which was the closest he could get. Drethkal committed to a strike. She found the contact point and applied enough pressure to demonstrate the opening. She stepped back. Drethkal committed again. She found a different point. She stepped back. The tail sweep came at the 4-minute mark of the build, a technique that had ended engagements faster than anything else in Drethkal's certified record. Sen had seen it in footage. The instructor had commented on it during a lecture in Cycle 41. The mechanical advantage is absolute when the target is below average mass. Below average mass. He had meant it as a disadvantage. He had filed it as one. Ravad jumped the sweep cleanly, not high, not dramatically, just enough, and landed, and her hand found the nerve cluster at his lower back before he had completed the motion's follow-through. It was a different cluster from the first. His stance degraded, a drop of 2 inches at the left hip, the leg wanting to take weight it could not quite hold. She felt it happen under her hand and stepped away before his arm could locate her. His biometric line was at 108. Her line had moved once since the engagement began. 61 had become 62 sometime in the last 3 minutes and had not moved again. Sen looked at his own hands. His threads were at 3/4 brightness. He was glowing visibly and he could not stop it, and there were cadets in the front rows who had noticed. He could tell because 3 of them had looked at him once and then deliberately not looked at him again. He checked Drethkal's throat frills. They were retracting. Not fully, not yet, but the base compression he had logged earlier had deepened, and the extension was pulling back at the edges, and Sen knew what this meant because he had read the species literature, and what this meant in Sorvani biology was not fear and not defeat. The literature described it as recalibration under duress. The process a Sorvani undergoes when the situation they are in is not the situation they believed they were in. He had only ever read about it. He had never expected to see it in person. He logged it. Frill retraction, partial, instructor Drethkal, cycle 44, session 11, approximately 6 minutes into engagement. Then he wrote, first confirmed instance in 4 cycles of service. Then he looked at the hall. The cadets in the front rows had moved. Not dramatically, not stood, not retreated, but their chairs had shifted back from the floor's edge by varying distances, small adjustments made without apparent awareness or decision. A Veteran cadet in the second row had both hands flat on the armrests. A pair of Sorvani cadets 3 rows back had their frills at the narrowed position that their species used when processing something that did not fit the available frameworks. In the observation gallery above the floor, Sen could see 2 assistant instructors at their stations. Both of them were typing. Neither was filling out the standard session form. He did not know what they were writing. He did not ask. He logged that they were writing it. Drethkal attempted a grapple. He came in low and close, arms wide, the technique designed for a target with less reach and less mass, the kind of engagement tender that worked on the mechanical principle that a smaller body, once wrapped, could not generate the force to break free. It was, Sen noted distantly, the same principle that had informed the tail's sweep, below average mass. The instructor had built his assessment of her into every technique he had chosen, and each technique he chose was the proof of that assessment, confident, controlled, exactly what you would use on a cadet you had already decided the outcome for. She stepped inside the grapple before it closed. Inside into the space between his arms, too close for the hold to finish. Her left shoulder caught his right forearm and turned it, not fighting the strength behind it but moving with it off-axis so the force went past her instead of around her. Her right hand found his jaw plate again and tapped it once, this time lighter than before. A single contact that landed in the same spot as the second one from the second exchange and meant exactly the same thing here, still, every time. She stepped back. "You're bracing the wrong side," she said, not loudly, not to the hall. Her voice had the quality of an observation made while doing something else. "You've done it every strike. That's not nerves, that's habit." Drethkal did not answer. His frills were at the narrowed position. His tail had stopped moving. His right arm, Sen noted from the biometric display, had not fully recovered the nerve cluster she had found in the first exchange. The signal for it was marginally suppressed, a secondary indicator Sen had not thought to watch for and was now watching. The 62 on Rava's display updated. It read 62. Then it read 63 as Drethkal drew himself back to full height and looked at her across the floor, and something moved through the hall at that moment. Not sound, not movement, but a quality of attention that Sen could only describe as the entire room re-seeing something it had already looked at. She had told him what he was doing wrong, mid-engagement, quietly, not as provocation, as information. Sen wrote, "Cadet identified technique error, stated it plainly, did not exploit it in the same exchange." Stepped back. Then he stopped writing and simply watched. Because in the observation gallery above, one of the assistant instructors had stopped typing, the other had not, and on the floor, Drethkal was setting himself for the next strike, and his frills had not re-extended, and the hall was so quiet that Sen could hear the biometric monitors ping, and the ping, and the ping. Drethkal came in with everything he had left. Not the grapple this time, not the arc, not the sweep. He rose to his full height and brought the overhand strike down with full weight behind it, the technique that appeared more times than any other in his certified record, the one he had described in a Cycle 41 lecture as the terminal move, when patience is done. Maximum reach, maximum commitment, his mass driving forward over his lead foot. Sen stopped writing. She dropped, not backward down, directly beneath the strike's path, and her right leg swept his lead leg at the ankle as his weight came over it. The mechanics of it were simple, and Sen understood them in the same instant he saw them. A body in full forward commitment with its weight already transferred has no base to recover from. The leg went. Drethkal's forward momentum continued without him under it. She was already rising. She came up behind him as he passed over her, the movement continuous, unbroken, and her left arm wrapped at his throat. Not tight, the biometric line for his breathing did not change, and Sen was watching it, but tight enough. She held him there. 3 seconds. Sen counted them by the monitor's ping. 1 ping, 2 pings, 3. She released, stepped back. Her arm came away clean, and she moved to the position she had returned to after every exchange, loose hands, feet shoulder-width, a meter of space between them, as though completing a motion she had planned from the start. Drethkal's throat frills were fully retracted. Sen had never seen this, not in 4 cycles, not in any footage in the certification archive. Full retraction in a living Sorvani, outside of recorded accounts in the species literature, was something he had classified as theoretical until this moment. The literature described it as the state that came after recalibration under duress had run its full course and arrived at an answer the organism did not have a prior framework for. He wrote, full frill retraction confirmed, floor engagement, cycle 44. Then he looked at his own forearms, where his luminescent threads were burning at complete brightness, and stopped trying to hide them. Yield. The word came from Drethkal. His voice was level. He said only the one word, which was the formal requirement under the challenge protocol, and then he stood still. Sen logged it. He read the engagement timer on his panel and read it back aloud, as the protocol required. 4 minutes, 11 seconds. His voice was steady. He was surprised it was steady. His threads were fully lit, and he was standing in the observation gallery of the Velkar Combat Directorate with his forearms glowing like a lantern, and his voice came out steady. Rivakane's heart rate on the biometric display read 64. 3 beats per minute, higher than when she had stepped onto the floor. Sen wrote that down too. He did not know precisely why. Something about the number, the 64 against the 4 minutes and 11 seconds, against the 3 nerve contacts, against the 847 engagements in the certified record that had all ended differently, felt like the kind of thing that should be in a document somewhere. He put it in the working log and let it sit. In the front rows, 6 cadets had moved their chairs back from the floor's edge by distances ranging from 4 to 10 centimeters. None of them appeared to have noticed doing it. 2 were still looking at the biometric display rather than the floor. One of them, a Vithran cadet in the second row whose name Sen had logged at intake as May of Siln, was looking at her own hands. The side corridor door opened. Commander Velorath walked through it and descended to the floor level without hurrying. She was a Heresi, long-limbed, with the gray-silver coloring her species developed in their 3rd decade, and a particular quality of movement that Sen had observed over 2 cycles of periodic observation. She moved as though she had already decided where she was going to stand before she entered a room and was simply traveling to that point. She walked to the floor's edge. She did not look at Drethkal. She looked at Sen's monitor station, at the tablet face down on the station's edge. She looked at it for approximately 2 seconds. Then she looked at the floor, at the engagement space, at the position Rivakane had returned to. She did not look surprised. She looked like someone confirming a calculation, a specific kind of absence of surprise that is different from being unsurprised because nothing has happened, and different again from being unsurprised because the outcome was obvious. This was the unsurprise of someone who had already run the numbers and was watching the result arrive at the value they had predicted. "Subproctor Sen," she said. "Commander, the engagement is closed." "Yes, formally logged, 4 minutes, 11 seconds. She nodded once. Her eyes moved to Rivakane. "Cadet," she said it flatly, neither warm nor cold, the word meaning only, "I see you." Rivas said nothing. She was still on the floor, still in the same position, and Sen noticed this with a specific quality of attention he could not quite name. She was slightly bored, not performing boredom, not using it as a display. Her face held the expression it had held in the back row before any of this had happened, the face of a person waiting for a form to process. Velorath reached into the document folder she carried under her left arm and removed a single page. She set it on the monitoring station's surface, beside the face-down tablet. She did not hand it to anyone. She set it down so that it was visible to the hall. Callister 9, she said, gravity index 1.4 times standard. The hall was very quiet. A flag to add Callister 9 to the Directorate's threat assessment database was filed 6 months ago. The flag required action from the Doctrine Board. The Doctrine Board did not action it. She paused. Not for effect, Sen had observed her long enough to know she paused when she was sequencing information in a particular order, and the pause meant the next item was load-bearing. Cadets from environments with a gravity index above 1.2 times standard develop, over time, measurably greater functional strength relative to their mass. Their reflexes calibrate to threat environments that our database has not catalogued. The human response profile in the Directorate's current files was built on core world biologies. Callister 9 is not a core world. She picked up the face-down tablet from the station's surface. She looked at the human response profile, still open on its screen. She set it back down, face down. The profile was not tested, she said. It was assumed. Sen felt the room receive it. Not one by one, all at once, the way a hall receives something that reorganizes what came before it. He watched it move through the cadets in the rows nearest the floor. A stillness, then a small collective shift, then several heads turning not toward Velorath and not toward the floor, but toward the biometric display still broadcasting Rivaz's number. 64. He watched them do the arithmetic. He could see it happening, the 64 against the 1.4, against the first strike that had found nothing, against the 4 minutes and 11 seconds, against the 3 nerve contacts that had each been placed and then deliberately released. 1.4 times standard. Every action she had taken on the floor, reread through that margin, became a different action than it had appeared to be. The step inside the arc's radius, the nerve cluster found at an angle the profile had not predicted. The sweep jumped cleanly, the grapple entered and redirected, and the jaw plate tapped in the same spot, twice, as information rather than as damage. She had calculated that she did not need more. It had not been restraint as performance. It had not been mercy in the sense of choosing not to do harm. It was calibration, the exact sufficiency of someone who knew the number they were working with and had never needed to exceed it. In the observation gallery, the assistant instructor who had stopped typing was now writing on paper. The other had sent something from his station. Sen could see the transmission indicator, and he had not sent it to the standard session report address. May of Siln, the Vithran cadet, had stopped looking at her hands. She was looking at Rivakane. Her expression was not one Sen had a word for. Veloras turned to Drethkal. She did not speak immediately. She looked at his throat frills, still fully retracted, the position his biology had arrived at and not left, and something moved through her features that was not satisfaction and was not pity and was close to the expression Sen associated with reviewing a report and finding that the error was structural, not individual. Your Doctrine Board seat is suspended pending full record review, she said, effective this session. Drethkal said nothing. His frills did not move. Rivakane walked to the steps at the floor's edge and climbed them. She moved without haste and without display, the way she had descended them, and she collected her kit bag from the seat where she had left it and set it on her shoulder. Sen watched her do this, and then he watched her tilt her head briefly to the left, the same angle he had seen in the back row before any of this had started, and the challenge medallion caught the gallery light at the inside of her collar. He had written medallion collar visible in his working log when he had noticed it the first time. He had not known what category to file it under. He did not know now either, but the not knowing had changed texture. It was no longer the not knowing of a thing that had no category. It was the not knowing of a thing that was going to require a new one. Velorath said, without turning, the Doctrine Board meeting is in 40 minutes, Sub-Proctor. Commando, I'll need your incident report before then. Sen looked at his working log. At the entries, the the 61, the face-down profile, the frill positions, the chair marks in the front rows, the numbers that had held and the number that had not moved. At first confirmed instance in 4 cycles of service and cadet identified technique error, stated it plainly, did not exploit it in the same exchange, stepped back. "I'll need 3 drafts," he said. She looked at him then. It was a brief look, the kind that confirms something rather than discovers it. "Then write 3 drafts," she said. "Get me the 3rd. Sen wrote 3 drafts. The first took him 6 minutes and used the word anomalous. He deleted it. The word assumed the directorate's model was working and had encountered a deviation. The model had not been working. It had been describing itself to itself, and the description had gone unchecked for long enough that no one in the building had thought to question whether the thing being described was real. Anomalous meant the system was fine and the data point was strange. The data point was not strange. The data point was a 19-year-old from a gravity index of 1.4 times standard who had found 2 nerve clusters and a structural habit in 4 minutes and 11 seconds, and then stepped back after each one. He deleted the draft. The second took him 9 minutes. He wrote the word exceptional and looked at it for a while. Exceptional meant the cadet was the variable. It placed the interest in her, in what she was, in what made her different from the expected, and that framing was wrong in a direction that mattered. The cadet was not the variable. The cadet was the constant. She had been exactly what her origin world made her from the moment she walked into the hall. The variable was the database, which had never included Callister 9 in the first place, and the flag that had sat on the doctrine board's action list for 6 months without moving. He deleted the second draft. He started the third and wrote 1 sentence. The Directorate's threat classification for colony origin cadets requires immediate expansion. He stopped, he read it back, then he wrote the rest without stopping. The current framework excludes gravity-indexed environments above 1.2 times standard. Callister 9 registers 1.4 times standard. The flag to include it in the threat assessment database was filed 6 months ago and not actioned. This session constitutes the incident that results from that inaction. The omission is the incident. He submitted it with 11 minutes to spare before the board meeting. Commander Velorath read the 3rd draft in the corridor outside the boardroom. Sen stood 2 paces back and watched her read it. She did not change her expression. She reached the final line, "The omission is the incident," and looked up. "Sub-Proctor. Commander. This is accurate." "Yes." She tucked the page into her document folder and pushed the boardroom door open. Sen did not follow. His role did not extend to the boardroom. He stood in the corridor and heard the door close, and then he stood there for a moment longer because his threads were still at half brightness, and he wanted them to settle before he went back to the monitoring station. They did not settle. He went back anyway. The doctrine board meeting lasted 37 minutes. Sen knew this because he was at the monitoring station when Velorath came back through the main corridor, and he checked the time. He did not know what was said in the room. He knew the outcomes because they were delivered to his station via the board's formal directive system, one after another, in the order decisions had been reached. Drethkal's doctrine board seat, suspended, pending full combat record review. All sessions taught using his record as primary curriculum source, flagged for re-evaluation. Duration of review, open-ended. All human cadet files, to be reprocessed with gravity index cross-reference before the end of the current cycle. Any file listing an origin world absent from the threat assessment database, flagged for immediate classification review before the cadets' first practical session. The challenge protocol invocation, the first in 40 cycles, to be entered into the founding charter addendum, not the cycle record, the addendum, the charter itself. Sen read the 3rd directive twice. The founding charter had not been amended in 11 cycles. The addendum was for matters the board considered structurally significant, not incidents, but things that changed the shape of the institution. He looked at the biometric display, still showing the floor. The floor was empty. The chair marks were still visible where the front row cadets had shifted back without noticing. He had photographed them for the report on his way back from the corridor. He was not sure why. He had done it anyway. He pulled up the directorate's archival intake system and opened a new classification entry. The field read, Colony Origin Threat Tier, Classification Name. He had been authorized to name it. The directive had said, Sub-Proctor Sen to draft classification nomenclature for gravity-indexed colony environments above 2 times standard for board approval. He had the authority to write the name and submit it. The board would approve or amend. He sat with the field open for 8 minutes. He tried several approaches. He tried a technical descriptor, something that conveyed the gravity index and the threat calibration gap without editorializing. He tried an institutional designation, the kind of language the board would find easy to pass without discussion. He tried a phrase that acknowledged what the session had demonstrated without making the session itself the name. None of them were right. He went back to the beginning, to the thing that was actually true. What was true was that the directorate had built a model and called it complete. What was true was that the model had never encountered the data that would have broken it, and the absence of that encounter had been mistaken for confirmation. What was true was that a flag had sat on a board's action list for 6 months because no one believed the missing world mattered, and the world had mattered in 4 minutes and 11 seconds. He typed 2 words, he read them, he submitted the entry. He did not consult anyone before he did it. The post-session intake debrief was a procedural requirement Sen had conducted 11 times. It took approximately 8 minutes. He found Rivakane in the commissary. She had a tray with a cup of something warm and a protein portion and was reading from a thin paper document, the kind the library still printed on request. He sat across from her with his debrief form and confirmed her name and enrollment number and origin world, which were required fields, and then he asked if she had any comments for the record. She looked up from the document. The medallion was always meant to be used, she said. I just read the charter. She reached up and unclipped it from inside her collar and set it on the table between them for a moment, a small metal chip, scuffed at one edge, the directorate's seal worn faint on its face. Then she clipped it back and returned to her reading. Sen wrote, Cadet has no additional comments. Medallion returned to collar. He noted her heart rate, which the debrief did not require, but which he had the reader on his wrist and looked at anyway. 63. He wrote that down too. Thank you, Sub-Proctor, she said, without looking up. He closed the debrief form and stood and picked up his documents. He paused. Cadet Kane. She looked up again. The classification entry, he said, the new tier, I submitted it this morning. The board accepted it without amendment. He was not sure why he was telling her this. He told her anyway. I thought you should know it exists. She considered this for a moment. Then she nodded, once, the same nod from the lecture hall, the nod that confirmed something already known rather than receiving something new. He left her to her food. The archivist who entered the challenge protocol record into the founding charter addendum confirmed the date 3 times before filing it. Sen saw the entry the following morning when the addendum update circulated to all station personnel. Cycle 44, active invocation, Cadet Rivakane, Callister 9 origin, challenge upheld, doctrine board record under review. Below it, the archivist had added, per standard practice, the prior entry for comparison. The prior entry was dated 40 cycles ago. The gap between them on the page was 4 centimeters of blank space, which was not a meaningful unit of anything, but which Sen found himself looking at for longer than the entry itself. The betting pool that had existed among the assistant instructors, predicting the engagement's duration, which Sen had known about and not acknowledged, ceased to exist sometime between the doctrine board meeting and the following morning. No one mentioned it. It was simply no longer a thing that was happening. In the main lecture hall, the chair marks on the floor from the session remained until the cleaning cycle ran. The cleaning cycle ran at second bell. Sen had taken his photographs before then. He filed his photographs in the incident record under Physical Evidence, Session 11, Cycle 44. The form did not have a field for chairs moved by cadets who did not notice moving them, so he filed them under Environmental Observation and added a note. The note said, cadets in rows 1 through 3 shifted seating position during the floor engagement. Average shift, 6 centimeters. No cadet acknowledged the movement when debriefed. He did not explain what the note meant. He did not think it needed explaining. The Velkar Combat Directorate's Threat Classification Database updated in the Cycle 44 revision. The colony non-standard category, which had existed for 4 cycles without review, which had held an indeterminate number of worlds including Callister 9, which had effectively meant not worth a separate entry, was retired. In its place, the new tiered gravity index system sorted colony origin worlds by environmental load. 8 worlds were immediately recategorized. Callister 9 was placed at the top tier. The 2-word name Sen had submitted for the tier was accepted by the board without amendment. He had spent 8 minutes on it. He had arrived at something plain, accurate, and without editorializing. The board had read it and approved it in the same meeting. None of them had asked him about the reasoning. The words made their own case. The Challenge Medallion entry in the Founding Charter Addendum was the first of its kind in 40 cycles. The archivist who typed it confirmed the date 3 times. In the commissary, a tray had a cup of something warm and a protein portion, and Rivakane was reading, and the small metal chip at the inside of her collar caught the commissary light when she tilted her head down at the page. At his station, Sen entered the final line of his incident report under summary assessment. The Directorate's threat model did not fail. It was never tested. It is being tested now.